Like this video and subscribe to the channel to receive heartwarming stories every week, like the one you're about to hear. My name is Helena. I'm 73 years old. And I thought that after so many goodbyes, nothing could surprise me anymore. But life sometimes hides in the places we least expect. For me, it showed up in a phone notification, just a friend suggestion, with a name I hadn't heard in over 50 years, Edgar C. Mello. My eyes froze on the screen, as if that name alone was enough to shake everything I'd built to move on. I tapped the profile without thinking, and there he was, older of course, but with the same eyes that once made me believe in love. I took a deep breath, accepted the friend request, and a minute later, the message came. "Hi, Helena. I don't know if you remember me." That sentence felt like a key, unlocking something I thought had been shut forever. I agreed to meet for coffee. After all, what harm could it do? But I had no idea what that meeting would bring back, or everything he was still keeping hidden. This is the story of what happens when the past decides to come back. The cafe was downtown, on a quiet corner where time seemed to slow down. I got there a few minutes early, heart racing like I was 20 again. I picked a table by the window and watched the street, trying to look calm. But inside, I was shaking. When he arrived, I recognized that slightly hunched walk right away, like he was carrying the weight of the world on his back. Edgar looked different, of course. His hair was almost all white, and there was a tiredness in his eyes. But he still had that half-smile, shy, crooked, that came before his words. When he saw me, he paused, like he was making sure I was real. Then he walked over. We greeted each other with a hesitant handshake, respectful, like the past was sitting there between us. The conversation started slow, questions about health, kids, grandkids. I found out he lived in another town, but was back temporarily. "Family matters," he said, not going into details. He mentioned he retired 2 years ago and had been writing some memoirs on his computer. I told him I'd stopped reading novels, but still liked to jot down quotes in notebooks. We laughed at the similarities. After half an hour, the mood got lighter. We reminisced about club dances, school festivals, and even that one time he dropped ice cream on my lap in the summer of 1968. It was strange and sweet at the same time. Being there, decades later, laughing at the same memories. But there was also a different kind of silence between us, like something important was hovering, and neither of us dared to bring it up. Before we left, he paid the bill without asking, and we walked to the door together. The street was quiet, and the sky was starting to darken. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, and simply said, "It was good to see you, Helena. More than I expected." I smiled. But inside, something tightened, because there was something unfinished in that goodbye. I went home in silence. Martha looked at me from the kitchen doorway and raised an eyebrow, the way she always did when she wanted to know everything without saying a word. I just said, "I saw someone from the past." She crossed her arms and replied, "Then be careful, because the past sometimes brings baggage." I pretended not to hear, but her words stayed with me, like a warning. The next morning, I saw a new message from Edgar. He thanked me for the meeting and said that if I wanted, I could stop by the old city library. "There's something I want to show you," he wrote. I hesitated, not out of fear, but because it felt like I was opening a door without knowing what was behind it. Still, I said yes. We set it for 4 o'clock. When I got there, he was already sitting by the classics section, a book open on his lap and a thin envelope beside him. "This stayed in the library for years. It was yours. I never left planning to disappear." I looked at the envelope without touching it. Something stirred inside me, but I held steady. "Why now?" I asked. He lowered his eyes. "Because now, I was finally able to come back." The conversation turned heavier. He told me that after we split, he went through a lot. Loss, an abrupt move to another city, and a marriage that didn't last. Said he tried to find me once, but I'd already moved from my mother's house. "After that, I figured you had moved on," he said, staring at the shelves. I stayed quiet, because in a way, I had. Before we left, he insisted I take the envelope, but I said no. "If there's something I need to know, let it come from you, not from some old paper." He respected that, and we said goodbye with a hug that lasted a bit too long for two old acquaintances. On the way home, I felt like there was something unspoken in that talk, something more than nostalgia, a heaviness in his eyes that wasn't just regret. That night, I sat on the porch for hours. Martha brought me tea and stayed quiet by my side, like she always did when I just needed to be. The sky was clear, and the air smelled of wet earth after the rain. I thought about Edgar, about how he held my hand before saying goodbye, about the way his fingers trembled, and how that scared me, though I didn't know why. Or maybe I did. Intuition doesn't fail as much with age, and something inside me was saying he was hiding something big, and this time I couldn't pretend not to see it. A few days went by without any messages. I kept busy with my routine, but it was useless pretending it hadn't affected me. Deep down, part of me was waiting for another notification. Not out of need, but because there was something unfinished in our last conversation. And when the past comes back halfway, the present gets shaken too. On Thursday, Edgar showed up at my gate. No warning, same shy smile. "Did I scare you?" he asked. I just shook my head. He apologized for not writing sooner, but said he had to see me. "There's something I need to tell you, and I don't want to do it over text." I nodded and invited him in. Martha watched everything from the kitchen, suspicious. We sat in the living room, and he stayed quiet for a few seconds before speaking. "I have a medical condition, nothing sudden, but it's progressive." My body went cold, but I kept looking into his eyes. "It started about 2 years ago. There are good days, bad days, and days when my mind slips. That's why I came back." He told me the diagnosis. I knew what it meant. I stayed quiet for a while, then asked, "Did you come back for me?" He hesitated. "I came back to make things right. And you were always one of the most important parts." That broke me inside, but I kept steady on the outside. "You don't have to explain now, but I need to know. What do you want from me?" He smiled, a sad smile. "Nothing. Just don't run away." We said goodbye in silence, a silence full of meaning, fear, and old memories. When he left, I sat down in my chair and took a deep breath. Martha came into the room, watching me like a mother watches a daughter about to fall. "He told you?" she asked. I nodded. "All right," she said. "Now you have to decide if you want to live what there's still time for, or protect yourself again." I barely slept that night. Not because of the risks, not even because of the illness, but because, for the first time in years, I wanted to take a chance. And that was terrifying too. In the days that followed, Edgar started sending me short messages. A good morning, an old song, a badly written poem, small gestures from someone trying to stay present without crossing any lines. And I slowly gave in, bit by bit, through little laughs. I started replying more playfully, with funny gifs, with pictures of my garden, and without even realizing it, we built a new kind of routine. digital, affectionate. Then one day, he invited me over to the house where he was staying. It belonged to his older sister, who was out of town. I said yes. And on a clear afternoon, I went. The house was modest, with big windows and the smell of old wood. But there was something cozy about it. Edgar had set up the living room with cushions and a pot of tea, like he'd been waiting for me, for days, or years. We talked about our youth, about what could have happened if he had stayed. We would have argued a lot, I said. He laughed. But we would have grown old together. I nodded. Maybe, or maybe not. The life we live shapes who we become. And looking at him, I saw a man I didn't fully know, but who still stirred feelings in me I thought were long gone. That's when he told me about Clara. My daughter, he said, looking down. I didn't have the courage to say it before. He told me she's in her 30s, lives in another city, and has a mild intellectual disability. She's my world, and part of the reason I came back has to do with her too. I listened in silence. No judgment, no romanticizing, just listening. On the way home, his words kept echoing. I knew what it meant to make room for someone with a life full of twists, and for the first time I asked myself, am I ready for this? To live a love that already starts with so much weight? Or would it be better to close the window for good and let the past rest in peace? But it was too late for peace, because my heart was already awake. After that day, I needed space. Not because I was pulling away, but because I had to understand what all of this meant inside me. I shut myself off for 2 days, took care of my plants, wrote in my notebook, baked a cornmeal cake. Martha noticed the quiet, but she gave me space. He shook your foundation, didn't he? I just smiled. Sometimes silence is the only way to hear what the heart is trying to say. On the 3rd day, Edgar showed up at my gate with 2 grocery bags. I brought bread, cheese, and an old movie for us to watch. I laughed at the improvised invite and said yes. We spent the afternoon in the living room, like 2 old friends who were okay with being quiet. We watched a French film with bad subtitles, drank tea, and dozed off on the couch. For the first time, I felt a strange peace, familiar. When he left, the air still smelled like lavender, a trace of him that followed me to the bedroom. And there, alone, I let myself imagine, what would it be like to share a daily life with someone again? Not out of loneliness, but out of a genuine desire to share whatever time is left. I had gotten used to solitude, but maybe it didn't have to end that way. The next morning, Martha started talking while washing the dishes. Is he gonna hurt you? I paused. Maybe, I said, but maybe he'll make me feel alive too. She didn't say anything else, just looked at me with teary eyes. She knew how deeply I'd shut myself off from the world, and how open that world suddenly felt now. I decided to write him a message. Simple, direct. If you ever feel like having dinner here, just let me know. His reply came within seconds. Thursday, can I bring dessert? I smiled. That was it. 1 step at a time, 1 meeting at a time. No rush, no guaranteed ending. Just the courage to say yes, because life doesn't wait. And Thursday finally came. I prepared everything slowly. Simple dishes, a clean tablecloth, flowers from the garden. Not to impress him, but because we deserved a beautiful beginning. Edgar arrived with an apple pie and a smile that seemed lighter. We sat in the kitchen, like old times, and the conversation flowed as if we'd always been there. It was all calm, simple, alive. After dinner, he offered to wash the dishes. I laughed. That's Martha's job around here. But she'd gone to bed early that night, maybe on purpose. We sat in the living room and he started talking about Clara. He showed me pictures on his phone, told funny stories, shared the tough parts. She's sensitive, stubborn, and loves cartoons. I listened carefully and kindly. It felt like I was meeting a new part of him that hadn't existed before. At one point, he got serious. I know it's a lot. I know I'm not light. I gently held his hand. At this stage in life, no one is light, Edgar. But even so, we can still be whole. He took a deep breath and squeezed my fingers. We sat in silence for a few seconds, and in that silence, everything was said. Before leaving, he hugged me. A long hug, tight, full of things that didn't fit into words. And when he pulled away, I saw tears in his eyes. Thank you for not running away. I didn't reply, just walked him to the gate and stood there, watching him turn the corner. That night, I fell asleep with my heart full. It wasn't some fairy tale love or wild, overwhelming passion. It was something calmer, more mature, a presence that made sense, and for some reason, I felt like it was running out of time. But maybe that's what made it all feel so urgent, so real. Time passed faster than I expected. Within just a few weeks, Edgar had already become part of my routine. Sometimes he'd come over for lunch, other times just to have coffee. We texted every day. Some messages were simple, others filled with unspoken affection. And slowly, something inside me began to bloom. Not like an old flame reigniting, but like a new way of loving. One day, he invited me to visit the neighboring town. I want to show you where Clara lives, he said. I hesitated, but I said yes. The drive was quiet, filled with soft songs from our youth playing on the radio. When we arrived, we were greeted by a smiling young woman, Clara. She had her father's eyes and a spontaneous hug that completely disarmed me. She called me Aunt Helena without anyone prompting her. We spent the day together, talked, had lunch out, laughed at Clara's stories. I saw a different side of Edgar, not the fragile man worried about the future, but a strong, devoted, gentle father. And I realized that maybe part of my admiration for him came from that, from the way he cared, and how, even when tired, he still gave all he had. On the way back, he seemed lighter. Do you think there's room for all of this in your life? He asked. I thought for a moment. I think there always was. I just didn't know it. He smiled and took my hand. There, in the moving car, with an orange sky on the horizon, something was sealed between us. Not through promises, but through presence. When I got home, Martha was sitting on the couch. So, you met his daughter? I nodded. She looked at me warmly. And? Still want to keep going? I took a deep breath. More than ever. She nodded back, saying nothing. Like someone who knows that sometimes life restarts when we have the courage to welcome everything, even what isn't ours. And for the first time, I felt like my heart was ready for more. It was on a cloudy morning that Edgar called me, his voice weaker than usual. Today's not a good day for me, Helena. My head feels heavy. I went to his house without a second thought. I brought soup and silence. I found him sitting in an armchair, eyes closed, looking worn out. I didn't say anything, just set the soup down and sat near him. Sometimes just being there is enough. He told me he'd had some memory lapses in recent weeks, small ones but scary, forgotten names, wrong turns. What if I forget you? He asked, eyes filled with tears. That hit me like an arrow. I held his hand tightly. Then we'll meet again, every day if we have to. He smiled, and that smile meant everything. That day, time felt different. I realized that every moment with him was now too precious to waste on fear. On my way home, I looked at the street like it was brand new, like everything felt more alive, more urgent, and for the first time, I truly understood what it means to love someone, knowing time can slip away at any moment. In the days that followed, Edgar got a little better. He went back to sending funny messages, short videos, clumsy little texts, like he needed to prove to himself that he was still here. Clara even sent me a voice message. "Thank you for taking care of my dad with so much love." I listened to it 10 times and cried quietly, because somehow she was already part of me too. Martha stayed observant. She asked short questions, the kind that went deep. "Are you ready to watch him fade little by little?" I looked at her firmly. No one's ever really ready, but he deserves to be remembered for as long as he can. She didn't argue, just hugged me. And I realized this love would be unlike any I had known. Painful, yes, but deeply real, and I wasn't going to let it go. Edgar surprised me with an unexpected invitation, a weekend away at a small lodge near the mountains. "It's not far. I just want some time with you, just us." I said yes, packed slowly, simple clothes, a light perfume, and a new notebook. Martha helped me, quietly. Before I left, she held my hand and said, "Go, but come back whole, and don't forget who you are." I promised I wouldn't. The lodge was beautiful. Wooden cabins, porches with hammocks, and the sound of a creek nearby. Edgar seemed like a different man there, freer, younger. We walked the trails, had cornbread at afternoon tea, and lay together listening to crickets at dusk. That night, he gave me a small box. Inside was a pendant with the letter H. "It's not a proposal," he said. "It's a reminder that you were, and still are, special." We slept together that night. No rush, no pressure, just presence. I listened to his quiet breathing, mixed with the cold breeze through the window. And in that simplicity, I felt a kind of love I had never known before. A love with an expiration date, but complete in its surrender. And maybe that's exactly what made it hurt and feel so magical. On Sunday morning before we left, he wanted to take a photo of us, with his phone facing the rising sun. We stood there smiling like two young souls in old bodies, and in that click, something was sealed, a silent promise, not of forever, but of presence, of being, as far as we could, for as long as we could. On the drive back, everything felt clearer. The road, the sky, the choices. I had no more doubts. Life had given me another chance, not to repeat the past, but to live something new with someone who had always been part of it. And even if it was brief, it was already worth everything. And I was ready to see it through, all the way to the end. The days that followed were unexpectedly light. Edgar and I were closer than ever. He came over almost every day, and when he didn't, we spoke over video. Clara started sending me messages too, emojis, simple phrases. It felt like life was building a new kind of family around us, and for a while, I let myself believe it might last. But one Friday afternoon, Edgar didn't reply. Not in the morning, not by late afternoon. I called. Nothing. By 6, I went to his house. The door was locked, but the neighbor said he had left early, alone. I froze. I called Clara. She hadn't heard from him either. "He gets lost sometimes, but he always comes back," she said. I waited all night. Nothing. The next morning, he showed up, disoriented, exhausted, eyes full of tears. He said he had tried to go to the store but forgot the way back. I just kept walking in circles. I sat on a bench and cried. A young man helped me. I hugged him tightly, and in that hug, I understood. Time was starting to take its toll, sooner than I'd hoped. In the days after, Edgar grew quieter, less present in his messages, more absent in the little things. It was like he was slowly retreating into himself. And me, not knowing how to stop it, just stayed beside him, close, with tea, with silence, with the little I could give, and with everything I still wanted to share. One night, he looked at me and said, "If I start forgetting you, will you remind me who I was to you?" My eyes filled with tears. I held his hand. "You were the man who came back, who saw me, who made me feel alive again." He nodded and smiled, like he was storing those words in some corner of his mind. And I promised myself, as long as he could hold on, I'd remind him of that every single day. Martha was waiting for me at home. The moment I walked in, she knew, just by the look on my face. "Today was one of the hard ones, huh?" I sat at the table and simply nodded. She made coffee and placed my favorite mug in front of me. "Do you want to give up?" I thought for a moment. No, because it's still worth it, even when it hurts. And in that moment, I realized I was living the deepest love of my life. In the days that followed, Clara and I took turns. There were good days, moments when he laughed, told the same stories, asked for music. And there were bad days, when even his own reflection didn't look familiar. But even on those days, I kept showing up. Because as long as he was there, even in pieces, I would be there too. One afternoon he called me my harbor. I don't know if he understood what he was saying, or if it was just a memory cutting through the fog, but it stayed with me, like a silent tattoo. I was his harbor, and somehow, he was mine, even as the sea around us started to swallow us whole. And maybe that's what love really is, staying, even when the world no longer remembers who you are. The next week, Clara asked to talk. We were in the kitchen drinking tea. "My dad wants to go back to his house," she said. "He misses his own bed, his own things, and I think it might be better too." I agreed. A familiar space might bring some comfort. But what she said next froze me. "He wants you to go with him." I stayed silent for a long time. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was scared. Scared of losing myself, of disappearing, of diving in too deep. Clara took my hand. "I'll help, but he trusts you, and you're the only one who still makes him smile." Her words broke me, and at the same time, gave me strength. I knew I couldn't run from what I felt, or from what I knew was right. I talked to Martha that night. She was shocked. "You're moving in with him, just like that?" I took a deep breath. "For a while, for as long as I can. I can't let him walk this road alone." She got emotional, but didn't try to change my mind. She just helped me pack a bag. "Bring warm clothes. It gets windy at night," she said, pretending it was just any trip. We moved to Edgar's house on a Tuesday. The drive felt shorter than last time, maybe because this time I knew where I was going. When we arrived, he recognized the gate. He smiled and said, "Is this where the pretty lady lives?" I smiled back. "Yes, and she's just now arriving." We walked in hand, like it was a new beginning, or maybe the most beautiful ending possible. The house was small, but full of memories. Clara had cleaned and organized everything. It felt warm. Edgar moved slowly through the rooms, touching objects like they were treasures, and I watched from beside him, caring for him with my eyes, with my silence, and more than ever, with my love. A love that asked for nothing in return, just presence, Time in that house moved differently. The days had a rhythm of their own, no clocks, no rush. Edgar would wake up confused, then slowly come back. We'd make coffee together. He'd tell scattered stories, talk about his youth like it was still happening. Sometimes he remembered me, sometimes he didn't. And still, I stayed. Because being there was everything. I was afraid I'd disappear, become just a caretaker, a shadow, a hollow version of myself. But that didn't happen. In fact, the opposite. Being with him made me more alive, more present in every gesture, every spoonful of soup, every page read aloud. That shared life gave me back a version of Helena I had forgotten, a whole woman, even in pain. Clara came on weekends, bringing groceries, news, hugs. Sometimes she cried in secret. Sometimes she laughed out loud. She too was learning how to love differently, with no control, no expectations. One night, she said, "I thought I was losing my dad, but with you here, I'm seeing him live in a new way." That hit me deeply, because it was true. There was life here, even as everything was slowly falling apart. Martha called me every day. She asked how he was, and how I was. "Don't forget about yourself, okay?" And I'd answer, "He reminds me of me." And it was true. Even when he forgot names, days, little details, Edgar could still look at me with tenderness, like his soul knew exactly who I was, even when his mind didn't. One afternoon, he asked me to dance. No music, just one slow step through the living room. I placed my hand on his shoulder, and he guided me gently. "You dance beautifully," he said. "I learned from you," I answered. And we danced right there, with the soft glow of sunset and the sound of the wind outside. Like two bodies who knew this dance might not happen many more times, and it became one of the most beautiful dances of my life. It was on a cloudy morning that Edgar woke up different. His eyes were lost, and he looked at me like I was a stranger. "Do you know where my mother is?" he asked. My heart sank, but I smiled gently. "She stepped out, sweetheart. She'll be back soon." He nodded slowly and turned back toward the window, as if waiting for someone who would never return. That day, he barely spoke. He drank his coffee in silence, refused the newspaper, and dozed off earlier than usual. I sat near him, crocheting just so I wouldn't cry. The house felt suspended in time. Every step I took carefully, afraid of breaking the silence. In the afternoon, Clara arrived. She sensed it instantly. "Today was one of the tough days, wasn't it?" she said, and we hugged in silence. That night, Edgar had an episode. He woke up scared, calling out a name I didn't recognize. He tried to leave the house, yelling that he needed to go find someone. It took me nearly half an hour to calm him down, and when I finally did, he collapsed in my lap. "I don't want to disappear, Helena. I'm scared." And me, without answers, I offered what I had, my lap and my presence. In the days that followed, he got a little better. But he wasn't the same. He was more fragile, more sensitive. He started forgetting simple things, mixing up meal times. Clara and I decided to hire a nurse to help us. It wasn't a goodbye, but it was a sign. The mountain was steeper now, and we needed help to climb as far as we could. One afternoon we sat on the porch together. The sun touched his white hair so gently. He looked at me and said, "You're the lady with the strong eyes, right?" I smiled. "That's me." And he, with a faint smile, "Lucky me." And I cried, quietly, because even without remembering my name, he still knew how to love me, and that was all that mattered. The end began with silence. Not just any silence, but the kind that comes before a farewell. Edgar no longer answered messages. He slept more than he stayed awake, and when he opened his eyes, he rarely spoke. Still, I stayed by his side, reading aloud, telling him about the day, talking about Clara, about Martha, about Lucas, the grandson, as if every word was still a bridge. Clara decided to sleep at the house for a few days. The house felt fuller, but also heavier. Laughter turned into whispers. Footsteps slowed down. Sometimes we heard him mumble old names, a scattered memory, an echo of youth. One night he called me the girl with the sad eyes, and I knew he was still there. Somewhere inside, he still saw me. Martha came to visit. She brought flowers, little cakes, and a long, quiet hug. "You were brave," she said, "and he was lucky to find you again." I didn't reply. I just held her hand. There was something sacred about that stage, a kind of love that isn't shown through kisses, but through silence, care, staying. And I was fully there, even tired, even hurting. On the second to last night, he didn't wake up once. His breathing was slow, steady, like he was already slipping away. Clara stayed with him in the morning. I went out to get bread. When I came back, she was sitting beside his bed, crying softly. I looked at Edgar. His face was peaceful, his skin cool, and his eyes closed for good. I sat beside him, placed my hand over his. I didn't cry in that moment. I just closed my eyes and took a deep breath. He was gone, but he was loved, and that changes everything. Martha arrived a few minutes later, and when she saw us, she simply said, "He said goodbye the same way he lived these last few months, with you close by." And I knew that was the end, but also a beginning. The memorial was simple, just the way Edgar would have liked. A small group, white flowers, soft instrumental music. Clara asked me to say a few words. I stood at the front with a steady voice. He was many things, but to me, he was a reunion. He was time recovered. He was love, true love, the kind that makes no promises and still gives you everything. I looked at the casket, and I smiled with gratitude. Coming back home alone felt strange. Every corner screamed his absence, his favorite mug, the chair on the porch, his slippers by the bed. But I didn't want to move anything, not yet, as if leaving it all in place would help him linger a little longer. Clara came by 2 days later. She brought an envelope. "It's from him," she said. "He asked me to give it to you, just in case." I opened it carefully. It was one sheet, just a few words written with effort. "If I forget, I'm sorry, but you are my home." And that's when I cried. Everything I hadn't cried before. I lay on the bed and hugged that note like it was Edgar himself. Because it was him, what remained, and all I needed. In the months that followed, I slowly returned to my routine. I reconnected with friends, tended to the house, answered messages. Lucas started visiting more often. Martha said I seemed more at peace. "There's something in your eyes that wasn't there before," she said, and I knew exactly what it was. It was love, fully lived, a love that, even with an ending, was worth a lifetime. One afternoon, I sat on the porch with a fresh notebook. I wrote, "It's not time that defines love, it's presence." And I stayed there, listening to the wind, feeling the sun, missing him, yes, but without pain, because it had all been lived, and because he, somehow, still lived in me. And maybe that's what eternity really is. It's been a year since Edgar passed, and sometimes I still wake up expecting a message from him, a poorly typed good morning, a song from our time, an invitation for tea. But the silence has settled in now. And I've learned to welcome that silence as part of what we had. Because loving someone who leaves is also learning how to keep going with everything they left behind. Today, I'm a different woman, not guarded by fear, but peaceful by choice. I've learned that love in old age has a different flavor. It asks for no promises, doesn't need a future, just presence. And Edgar gave me that, for months, with truth, with tenderness, with the little he had left. And that little was enough to change me completely. I've started writing regularly again. Little stories, reflections, memories. Sometimes Clara sends me messages like, "I dreamed about Dad last night," or "I heard that song and thought of him." Our connection remains. A quiet bond between two women who loved the same man, in different but equally deep ways. She still calls me Aunt Helena, and I let her, because honestly, we are family now. Martha, as always, is still with me, caring for the house, the plants, and for me. She never said it outright, but I know. She loved Edgar too, in her own way. She respected our story. And now, when she sees me smiling at nothing, she just asks, "Thinking about him?" And I say, "Living with him." Because memory isn't just remembering. Sometimes, it's real presence. The other day, Lucas asked if I regretted it. I